The Working Artist Project is brought to you by Second Line Arts Collective. Learn how you can support at secondlinearts.org.
We're creating a platform for those who are curious, one that tells the story from the artist's perspective. Moments in time, captured from the innovators who are reshaping dance, music, theater, and the visual arts. This is the Working Artist Project.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and welcome to the Working Artist Project. My name is Darian Douglas, and tonight I'm back again with the one and only Gregory B.I.G. What up, Greg?
What's up, Darian? How are you?
Oh, man, I'm great, man. Everything's great. And what's today? Today is Monday. Happy Monday, bro.
Let me just say for the record, I know I'm a diehard New Orleans Saints fan, and I have conceded that Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time. You know what? I just, I hope maybe we could sign him next year and win a Super Bowl. Just forget it, whatever,
I'm a Lakers only kind of guy, man. So I don't even know who Tom Brady is, man. I don't know what the Super Bowl is. But I did eat chicken wings yesterday, but I don't know what that means.
You better watch, man. You gotta watch out for the Pelicans too, man, because they're coming.
Oh, yeah.
They're 3-game win streak. We're on.
Yeah.
We're on fire, man.
See, there you go, adding and subtracting again, man. 3 games, and that's the perfect segue to talk about tonight's guest, who is a mathematician. Also, he can probably help you out with your stocks. He can also write you a song. He might can even build you a house, man. And we're very, very excited to have the one and only Marcus in the crib tonight. And he's gonna, hey, there he is. What's up, Marcus?
What's happening, man?
Hey, Marcus.
Everything's good, man.
Doing?
I'm good. And we was just about to until you came in here, we was gonna make some jokes about you, but you just barged in on us.
Now you can say them. I love good jokes. I want to hear jokes. Y'all got jokes? I love jokes.
Don't worry. Greg is going to at least tell one joke tonight. I can guarantee you that. But yeah, bro, it's good to have you here, man. You're an interesting person because you did something unbelievable. You were a hedge fund guy who decided to give it all up to pursue a career in jazz.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why would you do something like that?
So I was always playing music as a kid. I always had kind of 2 loves, which were music and math. My father was an accountant, and he was doing his I grew up for a while. It was just me and him. So I remember he was doing his business degree, and his executive MBA. He's going on nights and weekends, and he would sit me on his lap and like, all right, cool, we doing these bond valuations right quick. Like, you doing this math? I'm in 4th grade. He's like, nah, it's fine. That weird looking E, that's a sigma. That means you would add everything. It's good. But he also played the saxophone in college. So from him, I got these kind of 2 passions and influences and was kind of nurtured. Came time for college, and I ended up going to Harvard because all of my music mentors said, man, you can play, you're going to go into debt messing around with jazz school. Your grades are good. Like, man, go to school. And I didn't like math at the time because I got in an argument with a 6th grade teacher, and I was kind of being a brat about it. But once I got there, and I had fun freshman year, but when I figured I was going to take it seriously, starting sophomore year, I said, you know what, I really want to learn math, because when am I ever going to be able to learn this stuff again? If I'm interested in history or literature, I can read, so I can pick up a book, but like math or theoretical physics or computer science, like I probably want to be trained in that because that's a really hard language. So I got into that. I did some math research in one summer, and we solved a few unsolved problems and published a paper. We got to present at some conferences, but then I realized, like, I don't really want to spend my whole 20s in a library. And I went to New York, after my research was done. And I see all my friends, on Wall Street, and they hanging out. They got fly shoes, there's models everywhere. Like, I'm like, what is this? I never thought about finance in my life, but I had the math degree, so I just kind of, I walked into some interviews and say, hey, I'm really good at math, so maybe we can make something work. And I ended up working at this fund.
As bro, that you know what though, you know you got me at models, man. You know I might have chose Greg, man. I should have paid more attention, you know, in trigonometry, bro. Because
You know, I guess it just like leads me to one of my favorite quotes. I love to tell my students, yo, it doesn't matter what you're good at. You just be the best at whatever it is that you do, and you're gonna be all right in that department when it comes to the bread and the extracurricular things.
absolutely, absolutely. So you go to Harvard, you figure out you're a math genius, and then you stumble upon Wall Street.
Yeah.
And what was it like working in Wall Street? What was it like?
Well, the problem with that was, you know, it was, well, first off, it was really interesting. And I'll tell you why. I started in 2008. So I was sitting on Wall Street on September 19th when all the markets crashed, and I'm watching all the charts go crazy. I'm watching all the interest rates, you know, plummet. I'm watching, I'm hearing all the crazy calls with counterparties and this and that. And so I kind of felt like Forrest Gump, because I'm like sitting in the middle of history, like a little bit on accident, because I'm, you know, I'm just doing my thing. And it was really interesting because I got to get that perspective on the world. Which is very particular, you know, it very much talks about the world being dominated by capital flows. Why do things happen in history? Why do things happen in culture? What is kind of the fundamentally most important, I guess, operation of human society? Well, it's the economy in that worldview. It's generating capital and it's moving capital around. And it was interesting to hear that perspective. It was also interesting to see the people. So not only did I work at a hedge fund, but I worked at Bridgewater. Ray Dalio is now really famous, and he's kind of like a popular icon.
Yeah, I know all about Ray Dalio. Yeah.
So we had a copy of the principles back then, and it was just like a PDF that he sent out to the company with mad typos in it and all this stuff. So we, you know, been up on that for a while. And so hearing the Bridgewater perspective and worldview versus the, you know, regular Wall Street perspective and worldview. Because the interesting thing about Bridgewater people, especially the people at the top, is it's not like a Gordon Gekko kind of energy. It's very principled. It's very humble. Matter of fact, I got cool with, so the number 2 guy in the company, Bob Prince, is a jazz fan. Matter of fact, when I was interviewing, or after I'd already gotten the gig, they took us out to a party in New York, and there was, you know, mingle, meet everybody in the company, and I'm hanging out with the number 2 guy in the company, and he heard I played the saxophone. He's like, "Who's your favorite?" I'm like, I was a James Carter head at that time. It's one of my favorites, huge influence on me. So I'm like, "Man, James Carter." He's like, "Really? Oh man!" And we start chopping it up. And you know, at these cocktail parties, you're supposed to talk to people for like 20 minutes and then keep it pushing. We're talking for like a straight up hour. And so I got close to him, and I'm actually, you know, still cool with him to this day. But you know, in seeing him up close and seeing what his values were, seeing how he dealt with his family, seeing how, you know, his concept of, you know, being a player in the markets, trading assets, why capital flow is interesting. It was a real passion. It wasn't just, I want to make the most money out of everybody. It was like, nah, I really care about how the world works, and I feel like this is the way that the world operates. But the thing about, go ahead.
Can I ask you though, like, you know, I guess as a jazz musician, part of like the stereotype, or even just as a musician in general, we have a lot of like fighting the establishment kind of vibe, and we look down on money and things like that. But can you talk about the principles that you were kind of referring to that again, like that drove the company, and then like from a stock perspective, or like an economics perspective, like, is it all evil? Like, what's the vibe on that?
Man, okay, we could do this. So here's what inspired me about.
I gotta know.
No, here's what inspired me about working for Bridgewater. So the other thing that Bridgewater gets is it's a cult. There's like everybody's being crazy monitoring and surveillance, and you know, they talk to you a kind of way. And what I'll say is that what inspired me about Bob and Ray was they really, really love what they're doing. They were talking about they would do this when they were recounting a story. They had no clients. They were driving to their first client. The car was broke down. It was, you know, the muffler was jacked up. It was spewing black smoke out the back. And, you know, they were really hoping that this client would, you know, like their investment ideas. But there was just it's the same way when musicians talk about music. There's this real passion and love for the thing. And that inspired me to leave the hedge fund, because I'm like, man, moving capital around the world is not what I super care about. And seeing that they built this, remarkable company off the strength of that passion inspired me to say, well, I want to do this with music. I would say that kind of the other things is, if you watch movies like American Psycho, or you watch movies like Wall Street, Gordon Gekko and Bud Fox, or Wolf of Wall Street, or things like this, or maybe if you hang with some certain Wall Street cats, down at the gig, or you play and you meet people around, especially New York City, they hanging out, you'll get a kind of impression about how people think about the world, how people operate. And certainly from the news, if you don't know the people purely, but you know how the companies move, and you kind of say, well, the values of the companies are reflective of the value of the people, there's this idea that all of it is pretty evil, and they don't care about regular people, and all they care about is money, and that's the only thing that's important. And I think that that's true in some cases, but I think that you start to get around people and you see how people hold the thing differently. These people in particular, I was just impressed by how much they cared about their family. What the kids weren't spoiled. The kids weren't running around wilding. Like they like manners, etiquette, culture, genuine love for each other. The way they dealt with members of their family who weren't necessarily as rich. Because I got invited to like one of the Christmas parties on a regular. Like just the way they spoke to people, the kind of like the religion in particular. In some of the cases. It was just like, this is a whole human being. And that's something that one can be extraordinarily successful and you can still be a whole human being, which is not at all what you see if you consider, New York Times or Mother Jones articles about Goldman Sachs, or if you look at, some of the movies or media that I mentioned, or you go around some people who are just super greedy and sociopathic and like hold that energy. It wasn't everybody. And that's something that I took and once again really inspired me to do music, because it's like, well, I want to be a whole human being. Like being a billionaire is nice, but like at this time when I still have time to create, what I want my life to be, like whole human being sounds good. And frankly, when I was working there, I was not a whole human being. Like wow. I will say that I remember 2 weeks in, I could see my reflection from behind the Excel spreadsheet. And it was like, yo, bro, what are you doing? You're a musician. You don't need to be here. And I, my response to him was like, man, shut up. We're making money. Shut up. Like, don't say that. But eventually he won out because I was just super dysfunctional. I was dark. I was depressed. I was wilding out. Like, I could tell you a really funny story. This is one time I was driving home from work and I was so angry, man. I didn't even understand why I was so angry, but I was so dark inside, man. And I just started rolling through, this very wealthy white neighborhood in Connecticut with Dipset all the way up, like hoping that hope like Suicide by Cop, like hoping that would happen, like hoping an incident would happen. I was wilding out, and but like watching them, they were full whole human beings, and that really inspired me to figure out how I could do that for myself.
Yeah, it's interesting that you got into that situation and found that drive to do the thing that you were put on earth to do. And you didn't let the money, like Greg was alluding to, which I think a lot of people do, corrupt their sense of self. Mm-hmm. And so that speaks volumes to the type of person that you are, and maybe the people who raised you to put value in the place that it should be, and not get caught up in a new Ferrari. Mm-hmm. Because I think models like musicians too. So
yeah.
Can I?
It's a different, yeah.
But while we're like again, like talking about the two worlds of music and finance, I definitely would love to dig more into finance. But like, what are some basic things that like through your experience in dealing with the market and math and things like that, like what are some basic things musicians can do to to get into the market, or at least like financially set themselves up? Like, is there any advice that you can bestow upon us?
Well, see, the problem with working for a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund is it doesn't really scale to if you don't have billions of dollars. Like they can make market moves and we would take on positions and we would look at risk in a certain way because there was so much in the fund. And I found that most of the kind of inside baseball wouldn't really work if you're scaled down. And a lot of it is, well, they're also tracking the markets every day. So the advice is with respect to what's going on in the world at that time. But I will say one of the big pieces of advice, and one of the big things that stuck with me, which is advice from some of the higher ups, was like avoid debt like the plague. Debt is when you go into debt, you're borrowing from your income tomorrow, except you don't know how much you're gonna make tomorrow, and you're gonna have to pay it back. So I mean, in addition to my family, they put a healthy fear of like wanton debt in me. And for me, it's like I've always tried to keep, my credit card bills or keep my credit card really low. Not, like figure out cheaper ways to do things so that I don't have to go into debt. If I'm going to go into debt, like make sure it really means something. If I can't really just buy something outright with cash, then wait a week and see if I still want it a week later. And that's just general rules of thumb. But yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice, man. It's great advice. And I think you're sitting here, it's funny enough, you're sitting here with two people who are completely debt free, and which is unheard of in any profession now. But that's why me and Greg are friends,
Right.
Because for me too, it's the same with debt. Like I live by the rule: if I can't buy 5 of them with cash, I can't afford it, so I don't buy it. It's just just keep it. I just try to keep it funky like that. One thing that we haven't gotten to is that you use your mathematical powers for good, and you found a way to merge math and music more so than the common way of us just counting. And you do that through education. And before you talk about it, I would like to show our audience a little clip of some things that you've done, because you're famous. It's a TED Talk. It ain't at it ain't at Chalawaska High School in Topeka, Kansas. So
they got good chicken fingers at Chalawaska, bro.
That's right.
That Lux lady on point.
Where's Chalawaska at?
I made it up.
Let me tell you, man. Watch out. There's some high school. I've been to some high schools that have like nicer performing arts theaters than performing arts theaters.
Yeah, there it is. Let's go ahead and play this video, and y'all get a vibe on what Marcus can do.
After all that testing, we're frozen. That's the best part about doing live things like this.
Right.
Mr. Batiste, my teacher growing up, would always say, he's like, never go on stage with children or live animals. You never know what they're gonna do.
That's Alvin Batiste?
Yeah.
Yeah. I heard a lot about him. Man. He taught a lot of people in New Orleans, huh?
Man, he was a legend, man. I mean, everyone who came out of New Orleans from Wynton to Randy Jackson to Jonathan Batiste came from Mr. Batiste. So, oh, Mr. Douglas is out of here.
Hey.
Well, there you go. You go.
Yeah.
Man, so, man, why don't you? I would love to hear about again, like what Darian was about to allude to with how you've been integrating math and music and with the young people of today.
Right. Well, so I got into math in school. Once I figured out I wanted to take school seriously, I got into math, and as I decided to become a musician, I still had this love for math. I would find myself reading textbooks from college, maybe stuff that they didn't cover. I go read up on it. I got into theoretical physics, which needs a bunch of math. And, I would just hang out in Barnes and Noble, on my off time, just, going through all these books. And there was a time when I felt like I wanted to go to graduate school. And so I took a course in physics, graduate school physics, but I realized I couldn't also be a musician. I still like touring. I still like being out late and hanging. And, I'm bright, but I'm not the guy who, will be able to not sleep and then do theoretical physics and then do a gig all night. And, you got to choose one if you're going down those paths. And it would torture me because if I stopped doing math, my whole life would fall apart. But if I stopped doing music to focus on that, I'll have fun, but my whole life will fall apart. Like internally, I'll just be dark. So I really wanted to figure out a way to put them together such that I could do both at the same time and such that I could conduct investigation. And what it got to is like, well, for me, I started to ask myself the question, for me, why do I care about both of these things? Like, why is it that I care about them so much that my life just starts blowing up if I try to leave either of them? And I think that, and I started experimenting with the idea that there's something about creativity, there's something about beauty, there's something about the unique subjective experience about engaging with mathematics and music that make them kind of havens for exploration, creativity, and make them really robust. And that's kind of where I like to live. And I started kind of talking about that, and that grew into the some of the work that Darian had alluded to earlier. We're going to put up now, I guess.
Yeah, we're going. Sorry, y'all. My internet, for some reason, my internet just was like, "Fuck y'all conversation," and just stopped. So I'm gonna try, if it's cool. I'm sorry I missed that last point, but it sounded like it was great. We're gonna go ahead and play that now.
So this gets even better. If I were to dump all of the fractions into my existing set of integers, I get a new set that mathematicians call the rational numbers and denote with this special Q. And it turns out that the size of the rational numbers is also Aleph null. This is absurd, of course, you're thinking to yourself. There are an infinite number of fractions just between 0 and 1, 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5, etc. Surely this must be a larger size. This must be a set of a larger size. Well, let's see if we can find a rule that associates all of my rational numbers to all of my natural numbers. If so, then they would in fact be the same size. Now we're talking about fractions, and fractions are really just one number on top of another, a numerator on top of a denominator. And so I'm going to write all my numerators horizontally and all my denominators vertically, and that's going to give me a grid. And in this grid, in each box, what I'm going to write is all of the fractions that they create. There are some redundancies, right? Some of them reduce. Don't worry about that. It doesn't cause us a problem. What we do want to do is we want to find a rule that associates all of these rationals to all of our natural numbers. And this rule has to do two things. First, it has to enumerate all of the rationals, right? We want to say which box is first, second, third, fourth, fifth, because that matches up with our natural numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? The other thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we cover every number in the grid. We have to get everything. We can't leave anything out. So how do we do this? Oh, I know. Draw a counting snake. All right. So here's a counting snake. It's clear that if you were to let this counting snake go forever on this grid, we would cover the whole grid, and we can enumerate the boxes in the order that the counting snake eats them. So, all right. So in that way, we can say that once again, the natural numbers account for all of the rational numbers. Now, if I just lost you again, what I basically just told you is that infinity times infinity is infinity, right?
So infinity times infinity is infinity.
Yeah.
And that's everybody. If you get a minute, get on Google and YouTube and find that video, because it's a 20-minute video, and Marcus kind of explains the different ways infinity works. You know what I mean? And it's really mind blowing, and it's also very easy to understand, at least parts of it. And how did you come up with that concept of teaching?
So that, well, there's something you learn as a musician. You just know how to be on stage. You can read the energy. You can kind of improvise. And for me, it's like there are certain modes that I can go into that it almost doesn't matter necessarily what I play. It's like the thing that I'm pushing out, if I'm aligned with my instrument enough, is going to create a reaction. It's going to do something. And I realized that I can use that energy while writing the words, like when I was actually, constructing that talk. And the first time I realized I could do it specifically with math, I was at a house party with my then manager. She had some event going on at her crib, and it was the name of the event was like brain pickings or something, like not brain pickings, but it was something like that. And everybody was just kind of standing up and telling stories. And I just kind of showed up after rehearsal for this church that I play at with some of the church heads. And I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna say something. And so I went up and improvised like a version of that talk, because I know the math well enough that I can just talk through it. And the way people were just like, whoa, I'm like, yo, I could do that with math? All right, bet. Like, let me expand this. And that kind of turned into and that skill kind of got honed when I was working with the National Museum of Mathematics. I had a residency there for a couple of years. And I would just be talking about different mathematical concepts to audiences, to the special guests that we brought, which included like Nobel Prize winners and like, you know, award-winning musicians. So ELEW came through one time. We had Mark Gross come through. We had a couple of like high-level classical musicians come through, and you know, I developed it there. And then also, you know, I teach at a Saturday program for very gifted math students in New York City. And I taught there for a couple of years. I stopped because I was touring too much and couldn't be consistent. But since pandemic hit, I've been teaching there again. And so there's this way of the same energy you have on stage when you know you can play with the audience. There's this like spirit that's sitting over the audience or the people, and you just interact with that directly. It's the same energy.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, man. Because the one thing I've noticed about you is you're a great storyteller. Mm-hmm. And so for people like you, it's easy to marry things and to have a hodgepodge of kind of, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna teach people math and music at the same time, and they're gonna like it.
Right.
And so that's difficult, man. But you've pulled it off. And also when you make it to a TEDx stage, not once but twice, that's unbelievable, man. That's unbelievable. So kudos to you for that, brother.
Oh yeah, no, it was a fun time. Fun time. Yeah, it was actually ELEW brought me to my first TED. He brought me to the full TED Summit, the big one in Edinburgh, Scotland. Mm-hmm. And he probably don't mind if I tell this story. He wanted to do so. He'd done several TED things before, and he wanted to do something different because, you know, ELEW's like one of the greatest geniuses in our tradition alive right now.
Absolutely.
And you know, he would study to get his piano technique, which is pretty singular. He used to study anatomy books and read white papers about psychology and about the way the brain interacts with the hands, and understands like the differences, the like neurological differences in each finger and that kind of thing. But usually when he's on, you know, TED stages and various things, he's just playing piano. He's like, nah, they need to know that, you know, I got this other thing going on. He's like, Marcus, I want to do this with you because you got the physics side, I got the neuroscience side. Like, let's go in on them. And so he brought me to the first the big TED stage at Edinburgh. And then, you know, I met with some people, and, you know, they wanted to hear more about math and music specifically.
Oh, okay. So it's how it works. It's kind of a community, and they see one thing that, okay. Yeah. That's interesting. I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
Man, that's like, you know, I know this is something I hear from a lot of non-musicians, but I feel like there's always this like idea that like, you know, musicians just walk up on stage and magic happens, right? And it's just like, how do you do that? And it's, man, it's like I love having these conversations with people like yourself and hearing the story about ELEW, and just, you know, these musicians are some of the most like well-rounded people, like curious people, and they know so many amazing things about, like, which, you know, talking about psychology and yourself as a incredible mathematician. It's like, man, it's crazy to like how the whole brain and how everything, you know, melds together. Like again, in your presentation, you know, one of the first things I noticed was how charismatic and how, you know, you had the audience like at your fingertips, just in the same way like when I first met you and you were playing, you just have that captivating thing. And
thank you, man.
But, you know, maybe like kind of going back into like the idea of math, could you like talk about like why is it important for a young person to get into math? Like, what is the value of, you know, math? And then I would love to hear your opinion on why it's important for a young person to be into music also.
All right, well, I'll answer the second question first, because there's you'll see. Math and music are places where you can be creative. They're places where there's enough structure and enough tradition and enough history but enough freedom and openness for you to really dig into how your own mind works. In both situations, in order to do this well, you have to have a mental image of how everything works. You know, if you're composing a piece, you have to, maybe you don't know how it sounds exactly, but you have to know how like the shapes of the rhythms and the colors of the chords, all that kind of interact. Or if you're writing, you know, maybe you're writing counterpoint, it's the same thing. Like you have to have some kind of internal reference point, and you want to develop that. Same thing if you're doing math, right? If you look at an equation, you want to have an internal reference point for how it can be solved. And if you're looking at the world, you might want to, you'll need to have an internal reference point for how you could write it out as an equation. Having those kinds of things, like having that kind of mastery of your own mind to be able to take whatever and interpret it into your own body, and then to be able to execute and have that reciprocal relationship, I think is one of the most important, like grounding, deep, like spiritual things one can do. If everything is just mental, then it's kind of weak, it's thin. If everything is just physical, well, there's not necessarily enough imagination to be able to take it forward. And if things aren't structured enough and they're mental, then stuff can get crazy and you don't actually gain anything. You can't distinguish when something is brilliant from when something is dumb as hell. And so math and music in particular have enough structure that you can distinguish brilliance, right, in a variety of traditions, whether it's from like a Western classical compositional tradition, whether it's dealing with the energy, like the rhythm and the tradition of like New Orleans music, whether it's dealing with something from West Africa, whether it's dealing with something from India. Each of these traditions have enough boxes and parameters around them that you can be genuinely creative. And the same is true with math. As far as math goes, I think you know, people should get into math because I guess okay, quick plug. I did an interview. I'm hosting my own podcast. It's called The Poolside Polymaths. It's with my homegirl. She's the quantum ballerina. She got a PhD in quantum optics from Oxford. Wow. And like dances with national ballet companies around the world. Wow. Like she's a beast. Wow. And we actually have our second episode coming out tomorrow with Neil deGrasse Tyson. We did an interview with him.
Wow.
Yeah. Right. And so one of the things he talked about when we interviewed him was, you know, if you go to a party and, you know, you might say, hey, I'm a mathematician or I'm a physicist. People are like, I don't know that. And it's like, cool, you get points off, or you get neck off of like not knowing numbers that good. But if you went to a party, be like, yeah, so that reading stuff, yeah, I don't really read like that. I don't know how to read. Like, that's weird. Like, it's like, wait, what? like that would get awkward and dark. And I feel like having a basic association and skill set with numbers just makes for a wiser, more educated, more powerful, more like integrated population, especially if in the society that we're dealing with. It's important. People lie to you so much with numbers. You can mark improvement and development so much with numbers that if you have a working understanding of a basic understanding of how they work intuitively, as well as know something about statistics, as you know, something about statistics, if you're interested in science or engineering, something about calculus, so that you can just read and understand these ideas as they're put forth and not rely on somebody to translate for you in case that person doesn't have your best interest in mind, or in case, which is true in a lot of cases, people will hide all the good stuff behind math and create a club that you aren't allowed into. This is particularly the case, or this is, I think, felt, although I don't know that it's the case explicitly, but it's definitely felt like within the African-American community, where it's like, you know, I have one of my mentors is a Black mathematician at Princeton. And, you know, he does a great job of networking everybody together. You know, all the Black mathematicians know each other. And it's like the degree to which, you know, we can make this more popular, we can make more of us, means that like we just have ends in different parts of society where we're typically excluded, perhaps like finance, quantitative finance, right? But the reality is that both math and music are really hard. You got to spend a lot of time, you got to spend a lot of hours, and these are both things that you can spend a lot of time and a lot of hours and actually end up not being so good. Like there has to also be an orientation, a talent, an extraordinary level of work ethic. And so I would say that math at a high level isn't necessarily for everybody. Music at a high level isn't necessarily for everybody. But I think that all of these, like I said, are pointing to a kind of central locus of human creativity that I would like to believe everybody has access to. I don't know if everybody actually really has access to this thing, but it's important to find something that allows you to both hone your mind so that you can understand structure and balance and these things that are important, as well as be creative and develop, the internal representations necessary to take you forward so you can associate with the world in a deeper and more free way.
And I love that. I love that. Man, I'm sorry. Can I just follow up one real quick thing? I love that answer so much because it hits on so many different levels. But maybe like, I'm just out of curiosity. I'm sure you're not sitting around like doing like just math for the sake of doing math. Like how does like this deep knowledge and understanding of math like translate into like our day-to-day life that we're not even like in the same way that like some people we're not even aware of like how much music impacts our day-to-day life,
Yeah. All right. Well, so I am sitting around doing math for fun. I got a general relativity textbook on my bed. I took a in the fall in the pandemic. I took a graduate school class in this course called differential geometry, which is a whole thing that's a whole nother follow-up question. Here's where math is useful. A lot of the ideas from higher mathematics aren't really useful in everyday life, if I'm being completely honest with you. And frankly, the math that one needs to live a full and enriched life just isn't necessarily that high. But what I will say is that the way that math is taught now is you're dealing with identifying and manipulating patterns, which is kind of a meta skill, and you're dealing with pure logic. So math, when you get to like college level math and theoretical mathematics, you're doing proofs. You might have seen proofs in geometry where it's like, we assume that this is true. If this is true, then this is true. If this is true, then this is true. And you just kind of go down the line till you get to your conclusion. And advanced math is pretty much like that, except the things that you're playing around with are more abstract. They might be harder to conceptualize. They behave in interesting or weird ways. But being able to have that kind of mastery of logic is super important. Mostly because you could tell when people are bullshitting you. Be like, no, that's false. Like I've tried to solve that problem before that you're trying to convince me that you solved. That's not how you do it, bro. Like, so you get, it's very nice to have. I would say that's one of the aspects where, pure math is important as a training ground for logic. And once you have that logic, you can jump into lots of things. The downfall of it is that everything that's it's logical in such a way that it's linear. So things that aren't able to be expressed linearly, like a vibe, those are like math can actually like mess with that a little bit. Like if you're thinking too mathematically, and we see this in the music community where people are like too gassed on theory. That's how we talk about it. Is like that person sound like they just got out of music school and they ain't lived no life, and and they know all the theory and everything is correct, but like it has no energy, and you could go up and cut them with like one note, with like one long tone that's played with soul, and it's like everybody forgot about who they are, and and so like the linear thing and the mathematical training doesn't really help that, but for all the things that are logical and can be expressed linearly, like math is A1.
I do say, I'm glad you brought music up, and I want to pivot real quick, for the rest of the show, to your music career, and you got a brand new song out called "The Internet."
Yeah.
And it's dope. It's dope. And we're gonna play it a little bit later on.
Okay.
But I do want to talk about kind of your upbringing, like not necessarily your upbringing, but just how you got proficient at the saxophone.
Yeah.
At the same time as reading, all these books about physics.
Yeah. Man, so like I said, my father played the saxophone in college. So that meant in 4th grade when they were handing out instruments, we didn't have to buy an instrument. We just went up to the attic, took it to the repairman, and we were good to go. And actually that happened before the first day of school. So he got me a little method book, and in August we were going through teaching me basic scales. I think I walked into the first day of school knowing how to play tequila.
Wow.
And that made the band director think, oh man, he's really good. But it's not that hard. And it's in B flat, like So band director thought I was good, and he started giving me extra lessons, and I just kind of maintained the distance. And I grew up, my town of South Orange, New Jersey is where I grew up, is a place where a lot of musicians live. In I guess that generation in the 80s and 90s, it was one of the towns that once cats got enough money to move out of the city because they were tired of that nonsense, but still wanted to be near it and be in the energy, they would move to my town. So Don Braden lives in my town. I went to school with Thelonious Monk's grandkids. T.S., of course, lived in the town. Claudio Roditi, John Lee, Dionne Warwick. Lots of people, you know, were in that area. And so there are a lot of robust music programs. You might have heard one of the programs that's getting a lot of neck right now is Jazz House Kids. And so that didn't exist when I was coming up, but a lot of the faculty formed programs that were around when I was a kid. So, you know, the program evolved and it got under, you know, Christian McBride and Melissa Walker's leadership eventually, but it's like the same crew of teachers, the same people we would see around the New Jersey. I also participated in the New Jersey PAC Jazz for Teens program. So there was a lot of the music in my area. And I got a chance to play and perform a lot of jam sessions and, you know, started gigging with a band. And this band was really crazy. There was a guitarist who was super into Hendrix. It was a gospel drummer, and it was this cat Eric Hudson on piano who had a really dope career as a producer. He produced Flashing Lights for Kanye. He was a prodigy. He played like every instrument like real well. And his father produced like Holiday for Madonna, and like had a whole band in the 80s and that kind of thing. So the band had all these different musical influences. We just hang out with each other and shed. And so yeah, that's what the come up was like.
Wow, that's insane, man.
Yeah,
that's insane. I guess you're really lucky to be in that environment. And it's funny because a lot of saxophone players come out of New Jersey.
Yep.
And it's like y'all was all coming up together trying to get as killing as you could.
Yep.
And one thing I've noticed is all the New Jersey saxophone players in our generation are very unique.
Yep.
Which is hard to do in New York City, believe it or not.
Yeah. Well, you know, a lot of us, because we is growing up together, we was fighting. We was like, nah, you're not about to be the most killing on Saturday. I'm about to come for your neck. And it was really amazing because I'll shout out my brothers, Anthony Ware and Erwin Hall, who are like, you know, we three of us like really grew up together. And in that healthy competition, what showed up was like we each were aware of our limitations. You know, it's like there was something that Erwin could do that if I practiced that, I wasn't going to get at his level. So I had to just find my own style in order to combat it. Or because if I tried to play his way, then I would look stupid. I get played on Saturday. I wasn't going to let that happen. So, and then same thing with Anthony. Anthony would just come at it from like a whole nother perspective. It's like, whoa, what is that? I can't even mess with that, but I'm going to learn from it. Like it just forces you to go harder. So yeah, especially with the three of us, that was, I don't know if it was part of the plan, but it's definitely one of the emergent phenomena that came out of that.
Absolutely. I love that, man. But let's go ahead, if you don't mind, Greg, let's go ahead and play this tune by Marcus Miller, the saxophone player, called The Internet.
I'd never fall in love again. You know I don't have to, 'cause girl, I got the internet. I'll never fall in love again. You know I don't have to, 'cause girl, I got the internet. The internet. The internet. See the type of girl to post pictures of herself online, clothes on, clothes off, in the same pose. Calls herself a feminist. Well, I think feminism's just fine. We all get naked sometime. That's how the game goes. Tinder, a trending topic on Twitter. Why would I fall in love with her when I got like 50 of her on Insta? You know I don't have to, 'cause girl, I got the internet. I'll never fall in love again. You know I don't have to, 'cause girl, I got the internet. The internet. The internet. Love takes time and patience. Online is instantaneous. Control for complications. You find your Wi-Fi still to basics. These days we're more efficient. Know just where to get it. Terabyte a minute to satisfy addiction. Oh, so deep. He wants attention like she did. He wants to be loved and needed, but don't know how to receive it. That's why he's dreaming, screaming, I'll never fall in love again. You know I don't have to, 'cause girl, I got the internet. I'll never fall in love again. You know I don't have to, 'cause girl, I got the internet. The internet. The internet. The internet. The internet. My heart is a computer with a virus infected. Just plug me into you, baby, you'll swear it's electric. And when it's done, delete the history. Computer love is the future love. Real love don't mean shit to me. I'll never fall in love again. You know I don't have to, 'cause girl, I got the internet. I'll never fall in love again. You know I don't have to, 'cause girl, I got the internet. The internet.
Yeah, bro. The internet. Whoa, there we go. The internet, the internet, the internet, the internet. I like that. You know, that's you singing, playing, producing. What did you do on that?
I did everything on that. My boy mixed it. I did an original mix a few years ago. That song has a long story. But I performed, produced, wrote, did the whole thing.
Wow, that's crazy.
Man, I have to commend you on how, you know, we've been talking about math for the majority of this interview, and we haven't even touched on like how incredible of a musician you are.
Oh man, thank you, bro.
Hey, that's phenomenal. I mean, like, you know, 'cause it's like, you know, because again, it's like, bro, like with that tune, man, you know, not only like are you like an accomplished saxophone player, but man, you're a songwriter and a producer. Like that, those are whole different skill sets, man. That's some serious stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you were singing too, right?
Yeah, I sang it. Yeah.
I didn't know you could sing, man. I'm about to hire you for my bar mitzvah,
man. We could just put Marcus on salary, man. He could do everything for us.
Yeah. Well, I got into all of that after college, and when I decided I was going to be a musician, I was actually like, I didn't know if I wanted to play the saxophone, because at that time, none of the girls that I liked music with the saxophone in it. That was like 2008, 2009. Everybody was trying to turn up. Like crunk music was still a thing. It was a late thousands. So, you know, there was like the Southern music was popping in, R&B. Neo was out. And he's like a really great songwriter. You know, so sick of love songs. So right. I was like, man, this is beautiful, but there's no saxophone in any of this. And meanwhile, I go to, you know, jazz clubs in New York City. And at that time, there would be no women. It'd be like a lot of like broke, judgmental musicians in these spots. And It's changed over time. Yeah, man. Back in that time, you would go down to the Hang, and it was like, it wasn't like now the tourist vibe, or before Corona, the tourist vibe started popping, and it became like a really hip place. But I remember in that era, when I'd go down, the clubs would be kind of empty. It might be older people, or it'd be a lot of musicians, and they'd be vibey. And I'd be like, well, that's not really what else is going on? And then looking at, when I started and did a little bit of research, I saw that, well, if you're a songwriter or producer, you know, you might just wake up and a check will hit you in the head for like $100,000. Like, maybe I need to go on that route. And so I interned at a studio. When I first left the hedge fund and moved back to New York City from Connecticut, my first play was to intern at a studio. And I studied mixing and engineering and production under this man named Bassy Brockman. And Bob Brockman is a legend. He mixed Ready to Die. He mixed all the records for the Fugees. He did all this stuff. And what I got from him was, at the time, you know, before that, I was kind of a jazz snob. I was a jazz snob, and I liked all the stuff that we liked as kids in Jersey. But I was like, man, jazz is the ultimate music. It's really nothing else. Like, if you're trying to be deep with music, there's nothing else to get into. And when I studied under him, I realized that was like super wrong. And like all the nuances, okay, cool. Well, how do you compress? How do you produce? How do you make a composition with a single idea, you know, work for, you know, 3 minutes, 4 minutes? And he had me, you know, I assisted on like death metal projects. I assisted, there was this crazy project. This guy brought in George Clinton and Sly Stone to the studio to just record on some beat that he made. And I guess he had enough money to make it happen. So like, you know, I was assisting for stuff like that. Serrani came through. It's Serrani, just in case you never know, that guy, you know, he came through to the studio, and I was just like, and I had to sit and be like super humble, because I wasn't a bad motherfucker anymore. Like, like I was like on basic, and that kind of opened me up to all the other things that were possible with music. And from there, I got into developing the skill sets of writing songs and learning how to produce and understanding frequencies and, you know, playing with DAWs. And it kind of also gave me the mindset of, you know, how do I maintain my uniqueness when I come to New York City and everybody here is killing? Well, I can really just dig into the fact that I can just dig into music that I like and have it be from anywhere. And I'm just going to learn that. Maybe what's killing right now is to listen to this cat on the scene, or to try and sound like this. At the time when I was at that time, like every alto player was trying to sound like Kenny Garrett. And I was like, maybe that's the way to get cool in one way, but like, I'm going to go dig into, you know, okay, cool, I like this death metal. I like, what's it called? Slipknot had a version of King of Pain. No, it wasn't Slipknot. It's somebody else. They had a Sting, King of Pain. There's a little black spot on the sun today. That vibe. And I'm like, yo, I'm going to get into this and I'm going to learn it. And I picked up a bass because I really like the bass. I heard Oscar Alston play on Big Time Rick James, and that made me love the bass. I was just like, man, what is that sound? So I like got the bass and like started working on all this stuff. So that's really where that developing that kind of skill set came from.
Okay. Yeah, that's crazy, man. Unfortunately, Marcus, we need to have a whole nother show for all the stuff that you can do, man. Can you build stuff too?
I
haven't done a lot of that. I can figure it out though.
Good. Oh, God damn it. No,
Yo, I'm eagerly awaiting your autobiography, man. Like, I mean, I love, like, again, how this whole conversation started with the value of math and music, and it's crazy to see how this is like translated into so many aspects of your life, man. You know, you're a very accomplished person.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Look, Marcus, before we go, man, I want to give you an opportunity to tell all the people where they can first listen to your podcast, and then anything else you want them to buy, link to, check out, DM you, all of that.
Sure. So you can find me, my unified social media handle is Imagine with Marcus. You can find me on IG at Imagine with Marcus. You can, my website, imaginewithmarcus.com. Look up Marcus Miller, ELEW for the TED Talk. Look up Marcus Miller, Beauty of Math and Music for the TEDx Talk. I have an article in Scientific American. The internet this is a sneak preview, so I haven't released that yet. You can also find some more of my writing. I did a little bit of writing in Prism magazine around some of the protests, and I also, you know, have some writing that's on my website. There's going to be some more of that coming up. The podcast is called the Poolside Polymath Podcast. That's on Anchor, Spotify. It's on all your favorite, wherever you listen to podcasts. That's where that's at. And I think that's it. Everything you kind of find my website, imaginewithmarcus.com.
Perfect, man. Marcus, man, thank you so much for coming on the Working Artist Project, bro. We appreciate you.
Man, thanks for having me, man. It's such a fun time.
Absolutely.
Hey, thank you, Marcus.
All right, y'all. We'll catch y'all next time.
See y'all soon.
Later.